Why does Saturn have rings? What are the different types of clouds? How does an octopus swim? Why does a tiger have stripes? How do flowers grow?
Tell me why. The Video Encyclopedia is a reference work that's designed to show the answers to questions that young people ask. All materials used in this work are based upon the best-selling book series by Arkady Lyoko.
What makes up science?
Science is systemized knowledge derived from observation, study, and experimentation, carried on in order to determine the nature of principles of what is being studied. The studies are broken down into fields of specific study, such as the science of music or the science of plants. One such field is anthropology. Anthropology is concerned with man's physical structure, his customs and habits, his languages, arts and religions, and his civilizations. This means that a great many other studies are very closely linked with anthropology. For example, anatomy, physiology, psychology, ethics, sociology, and so on. But in actual practice, anthropology limits itself to a much narrower field. You might say that for practical purposes, 3 studies make up anthropology. The first is the study of man's place in nature. The purpose of such studies is to trace the connection between man's physical qualities and his development and civilization. The next study anthropology is concerned with is the various races of man and their classification. This is called ethnology. This science deals with the physical differences between the various human races. The third branch is called anthropometry. This is the science that deals with the physical measurements of man, the height and weight of various races, the shape of their bones, and so on.
What is archaeology?
Archaeology began when people became curious about what happened in earlier times. Archaeologists study the objects these early people left behind. There are 2 parts to archaeological work. Each part requires special training. The first part is excavating, or digging up the places where early people lived or worked. This is a job that must be done slowly and carefully. It includes keeping records of the work done. The second part is the studying of everything that was dug up, and of describing all these things so clearly that the information can be understood and used by anyone interested in the past. When both jobs are finished, the archaeologist can write the story of the people.
What is biology?
The word biology comes from 2 Greek words, bios, meaning life, and logos, meaning a study. So biology is the study of all organisms, plant and animal. What is studied about them is their form, their activities, their functions, and their environment. Biologists are not satisfied just to collect a lot of facts. They try to establish some links between the facts, some relationship. For example, they are interested in discovering the relationships that exist between man and the millions of living things that surround him. They want to know what effect these living things have had on man's own development. Biologists are interested in the greatest mystery of all, how life first started on Earth and why it took the forms it did. So they also study all the conditions that are necessary to life. And just as a detective bureau keeps a file, they try to classify every organism which exists on our planet. Biology is a very complex science. It has 2 main divisions: botany, which deals with plants, and zoology, which deals with animals. Each of these divisions is separated into dozens of subdivisions. Because in early times the study of plant life dealt mainly with plants as food, it became known as botany, from a Greek word meaning herb. The first people to specialize in the study of botany were primitive medicine men and witch doctors. They had to know the plants that could kill or cure people, and botany was closely linked with medicine for hundreds of years. In the 16th century, people began to observe plants and write books about their observations. In the 19th century, the work of an English scientist, Charles Darwin, helped botanists gain a better understanding of how plants, as well as animals, evolved from simpler ancestors. His work led botanists to set up special branches of botany. One of these branches is plant anatomy, which has to do with the structure of plants and how they might be related. Experiments on plant heredity were performed to find out how various species came to be and how they could be improved. This study is called genetics. Ecology is another branch of botany. It studies the relations of living things to the world in which they live and tells us, among other things, how we can most effectively use and conserve our resources. It deals with such things as how we can make the best use of our land, how we can save our soil, our forests, our wildlife. How can we reduce the great losses caused by harmful insects? These are examples of the practical questions the ecologist asks and tries to answer. Paleobotany, another branch, works out plant evolution from the evidence of fossil remains. Other branches of botany include plant physiology, which studies the way plants breathe and make food, and plant pathology, which is concerned with the study of plant diseases. The other branch of biology is zoology. Zoology is the science that deals with the classification of animals and the study of animal life.
When did chemistry begin?
Chemistry is the science used to find out what things are made of and how they can be changed. It was actually the desire to make certain changes that was the beginning of chemistry. Modern chemistry grew out of a study called alchemy. In the Middle Ages, alchemists searched for a philosopher's stone which could change other metals into gold. They carried on many kinds of experiments in their work. One of the first men to collect and organize all that was known about chemistry and science was Robert Boyle, who lived in the 17th century. He knew that compounds can be broken up into parts. Other chemists followed Boyle and made new discoveries. Joseph Black studied gases and air. Henry Cavendish discovered hydrogen, one of the elements that make up water. Joseph Priestley discovered oxygen, which is the element most common in nature. Antoine Lavoisier was the first to clearly explain fire. He also proved that nothing can be destroyed, only changed from one form to another. John Dalton had an idea that all substances are made of tiny bits of matter. Scientists came to believe that chemical changes came about through the combination of these tiny bits. They are now called atoms. Science of chemistry thus continued to develop, and today the chemist has become a creator of new materials. He has learned how to take molecules apart and put them together in different ways. Another fascinating field is geology. It is concerned with the earth and with the plants and animals that have lived on it. Geologists get this information by studying rocks and other signs and remains. Geology traces the history of the earth from its very beginning. It also studies the different forces that are at work changing the surface and appearance of the earth. And geology has its useful and practical sides too. Coal mining, oil well drilling, stone quarrying, diamond mining, and many other valuable processes of the present day are based on geology. Geologists decided long ago that the earth must be millions of years old because the thickness of certain kinds of rock called sedimentary rock is very great, and this rock formed very slowly. With the discovery of radium, they have an accurate method of obtaining the age of certain rocks which contain radioactive substances. These substances are gradually breaking down, and scientists can find out how old the rock is by measuring how much it has changed. Fossils are the remains of animals and plants that have been preserved in rocks. By studying the layers of rock and the animal and plant fossils that they contain, geologists have worked out the history of the earth. They can also learn about the climate of ages past by studying these fossils. Geologic time, or the history of the earth, is divided into eras, which are divided into periods and epochs. These are chapters in the history story of the Earth which geologists study. The study of all the sciences connected with the ocean to help man understand how the ocean was formed and how changes take place in it is called oceanography. As you might imagine, this takes quite a bit of studying. It includes the shoreline itself. The seacoast, the borderline between the land and the sea, is always changing due to tides, storms, everyday action of the sea against the shore, and upward and downward movements of the land. The temperatures and salt content of the oceans are also studied. The tides, which are regular movements of the waters caused by the pull of the moon and the sun, are studied constantly by oceanographers. Then we come to the currents. Ocean currents are like rivers of water flowing through the ocean. They are warmer or colder than the waters through which they pass. Because they are important to man, they are always being studied. As we all know, there are countless kinds of plants and animals living in the ocean. Oceanographers spend a great deal of time on this subject too. How deep is the ocean in various places? This also is very important to man, and there are scientists who are concerned only with the question of ocean depth. Even what is going on at the bottom of the ocean is of interest to man. We know there is a soft, oozy mud covering the floor of the ocean down to a depth of 12,000 feet. It is made up of the limy skeletons of tiny sea animals. The animal and plant life of the ocean bottom can be studied by dredging up portions of the mud from the sea floor. All in all, the ocean, which looks like just a big body of water to most of us, is really a vast and complicated subject about which man wants to learn everything he can. Oceanographers are increasing our knowledge of the ocean by the constant study of every part of it and everything in it.
What is noise?
Sound is the result of vibrations. Vibration is simply the moving back and forth of some object. But in order for these vibrations to be heard, they must take place in some medium, something to carry the sound from its source to the hearer. That medium may be air, a liquid, or a solid. When the vibration is very regular, the result is a musical sound. If the vibration is not regular, the effect on your ears is not pleasing. The resulting sound is noise. The three differences between one sound and another are loudness, pitch, and tonal quality. Loudness of a sound depends partly on the distance from the object to the ear, and partly on the amplitude of vibration of the sound-making object. Amplitude means the distance the vibrating body moves in its to and fro motion. The greater this movement is, the louder the sound will be. The highness or lowness of a sound is called its pitch. Pitch depends on the speed of vibration of the sounding object. This is called the frequency. The greater the number of vibrations that reach the ear every second, the higher will be the pitch or tone. The quality or timbre, tonal quality of a sound depends on the number and strength of the overtones which are present in the sound. These are higher notes produced when more than one part of the object is vibrating. Sound must travel in something. It requires something to carry the sound from its source to the hearer. This is called a medium. A medium can be practically anything: air, water, objects, even the earth. The Indians used to put their ears to the ground to hear a distant noise. Sound travels in waves. The vibrating objects cause the molecules or particles in the substance next to them to vibrate. Each particle passes on the motion to the particle next to it, and the result is sound waves. The speed of sound in air is about 1,100 feet per second, or 750 miles per hour. But this is when the temperature is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. As the temperature rises, the speed of sound rises. Sound travels much faster in water than in air. When water is at a temperature of 46 degrees Fahrenheit, Sound travels through it at about 4,708 feet per second, or 3,210 miles per hour. And in steel, sound travels at about 11,160 miles per hour. Speed of sound is not affected by its pitch. The speed depends on the medium through which it is traveling. Sound travels from a vibrating object to your ear by means of compression waves in the air. The vibrating object pushes against the tiny particles of air next to it, and the particles are compressed or squeezed together. As it moves back, it leaves a space with fewer particles in it. The thinned-out air is called an expansion. Sound waves are made up of such compressions and expansions of air. Not only does sound travel through water in this way, but it travels about 4 times as fast in water as it does in air. Sound travels through air at a speed of about 1,100 feet a second. Sound travels in seawater at about 4,800 feet a second. The fact that sound travels through water is very useful to man. Ships and submarines are equipped with sonic devices for finding depth or for discovering the direction and distance of other vessels or of rocks. By sending out a sudden pulse of sound from an underwater loudspeaker and finding the time it takes for the sound to return as an echo from the bottom of the sea, one can know the depth of the water beneath a vessel. By sending out sound pulses horizontally and listening for echoes, one can detect other vessels or submerged rocks. The direction in which they lie and the distance can also be determined. When a sound wave meets an obstacle, it may bounce back or be reflected, just as light is reflected. When a sound wave is reflected in this way, it is heard as an echo. So an echo is sound repeated by reflection. Not all obstacles can cause echoes, however. Some objects absorb the sound instead of reflecting it. This means the sound doesn't bounce back. There is no echo. But usually smooth, regular surfaces such as a wall, a cliff, a side of a house, or a vaulted roof will produce an echo. Did you know that clouds reflect sounds and can cause echoes? In fact, when you hear the rumbling of thunder, it's because the first sharp clap is being reflected again and again by the clouds. The ability of sound to produce an echo through water has proven very useful. Ships are often equipped with devices for sending and receiving sound signals underwater. By sending out sharp signals and timing the echoes, a navigator can measure the distance from his vessel to the ocean bottom or to any nearby vessel or obstacle.
What is energy?
Energy is the ability to do work. Energy is that which stands back of forces and makes the forces possible. There are 2 kinds of energy, potential and kinetic. An example of potential energy is a suspended weight. There is stored up energy in the weight, which can be released just by letting it drop. Water at the top of a falls or behind a dam also has potential energy. Now suppose the weight drops or that the water goes down over the falls. The mere fact that it is moving at a certain speed enables it to do work, and this energy is called kinetic energy. It is energy that is derived from the weight of a moving body and its speed. As a body falls, it loses potential energy and gains kinetic energy. But the amount gained is exactly equal to the amount lost. In fact, the total amount of energy in the universe is always the same. We can't create it or destroy it. What we do, whether we use falling water, coal, or the atom, is change it from one form to another. Coal is made of the remains of ancient trees and plants that grew in great swampy jungles in warm, moist climates hundreds of millions of years ago. When these trees and plants died, they fell into the quiet swamp waters, which protected them against rotting. Bacteria changed some parts of the wood to gases, which escaped, leaving behind a black mixture, mostly carbon, which was to become a coal seam. In time, thick layers of mud and sand were washed in on top of the vegetation. Pressure from this mud and sand gradually squeezed out most of the liquid, leaving behind a pasty mass which slowly hardened into coal. All this took place anywhere from 1 million to 250 million years ago. Energy, the ability to do work, comes from matter. Everything in the world that has mass or weight and takes up space is made of matter. Energy and matter are the two things that make up the universe and everything in it, and also keep everything going. The energy in coal originally came from the sun. Millions of years ago, plants used this energy for chemical transformations necessary to growth. Carbon dioxide from the air was built into carbon compounds that became coal. The way we release this energy from coal is by means of heat. Heat makes atoms and molecules move faster and faster until some of the electrons jump out of them. When coal is burned, it supplies heat energy. The energy was there all the time in a form we call potential energy. The heat releases the stored energy and changes it into kinetic or working energy. This is the energy that is used to drive the engines and generators that work for us. A fuel is a material that is burned in order to get heat and light and also to generate power. The process of burning or combustion is a chemical reaction. A material combines with oxygen from the air and gives off energy. The energy is given off in the form of heat and light. The energy in fuels came originally from the sun. The plants from which fuels come trap energy from the sun's rays and use it to build their tissues. Burning wood and charcoal releases energy that has been stored up by the plants in this way. When we burn coal or oil, we use energy stored up by plants that lived millions of years ago. There are many different types of fuels, and actually anything that burns can be called a fuel. Common fuels are wood, coal, natural gas, and petroleum products. Fuels can also be classified as solid, liquid, or gaseous. Or they can be classified according to their origin, natural, chemical, or metal-based. Wood was one of the first fuels used by man, and was his most important one for many centuries. It was the easiest to get and the cheapest. But during the 16th century, wood started to become scarce in Europe, and coal began to replace it. Coal contains a high percentage of carbon. Carbon is the most important part of most fuels. Fuels with a high percentage of carbon burn evenly and with a hot flame. Hard coal, or anthracite, has a higher percentage of carbon than other types of coal, and so makes less smoke and ash. The most important liquid fuels come from petroleum. They include kerosene, gasoline, and heating oils. Another form of fuel is natural gas. In certain parts of Iran and India, natural gas escaped from crevices in the rocks. The natives thought their fire god was responsible, so they kept the gas burning as a tribute to him. The curious thing is that in the United States, which seems to have the greatest accumulation of natural gas, people didn't know what it was either for a long time, and didn't know what to do with it. Natural gas sometimes escapes from rocks or crevices without any drilling. In the United States, these places were called burning springs as early as 1775. The first discovery of gas by drilling was made in the 19th century. However, gas wasn't collected and piped on a commercial scale until 1872. Natural gas is a mixture of combustible gases and vapors, chiefly methane. Sometimes it is found alone. Sometimes it is found mixed with oil and must be extracted. At other places, gas is found with oil but is not mixed with it. In nearly every oil field, there is natural gas. It gathers in porous rock with a covering of heavy shale that keeps the gas in and keeps the air out. It accumulates in a kind of arched section of the stone, and sometimes there are gas beds above the oil. Natural gas is clean and convenient to use for cooking and heating, but because of the problem of transportation, it costs more than coal in most places. Today, there are great pipeline systems that carry natural gas from its source to far distant places in a network that covers the country. In some cases, the natural gas is carried through these pipes for more than 1,000 miles.
Who discovered the atom?
The ancient Greeks believed that all matter was composed of atoms. In fact, the word atom itself comes to us from a Greek word which means indivisible. Because the Greeks believed that if something was divided and divided until it could be divided no more, the last bit was an atom. Their belief in the atom was not a scientific one. It didn't come from any scientific information, and it wasn't supported by any. It was a sort of philosophical idea about matter in the world. The atom as we know it is built on scientific investigations and theories. In 1803, an English chemist and mathematician named John Dalton was the first man to develop a scientific atomic theory. Dalton weighed samples of many gases and discovered differences in their weights. He found that gases, as well as solids and liquids, were made up of unbelievable tiny particles, which he too called atoms. He figured out that the relative weights for the atoms of those elements with which he was familiar. When Dalton stated that atoms of different elements have different properties and different weights, he really started the scientific knowledge of the atom. Ernest Rutherford, another Englishman, almost 100 years later developed a theory about the atom which was like a description of a solar system. A heavy nucleus in the center with a positive charge of electricity surrounded by negatively charged electrons. Today, scientists believe that the atom is made up of electrons, protons, neutrons, positrons, neutrinos, mesons, and hyperons. They have found more than 20 different particles in the core of the atom, and strangely enough, there is still no single complete picture of the atom that can explain everything about it.
Tell Me Why, a video encyclopedia series designed to answer the questions that kids ask most. It's a unique tool, a well-thought-out educational project created to take advantage of every child's fascination with video. Tell Me Why turns that fascination into an invaluable learning experience, providing kids with the answers they want and need through a series of 26 information-packed volumes. Tell Me Why. It's the perfect way to turn the family television set into a second classroom. And it's so much fun, it's like taking a field trip without leaving home. Tell Me Why is an innovation in education, with exciting film footage from organizations such as NASA, the National Aquarium, and the National Hurricane Center, as well as an easy style and colorful graphics. Children will want to watch each volume again and again. Quick search numbers have been provided in the lower right-hand corner so that you can fast forward to the section you want to view. This video encyclopedia is modeled after the nationally syndicated newspaper column and the critically acclaimed book series of the same name created by Arkady Leokum. Inspired by questions asked by his own children, Leokum has captivated a generation of children with explanations on a myriad of topics.